NC Pork, raising the bacon, raising the bar.
Welcome back to the David Glenn Show, now seen and heard exclusively here on the North Carolina Sports Network. It is playoff time in the National Hockey League, and while we hope you have enjoyed our recent conversations with Carolina Hurricanes owner Tom Dundon, head coach Rod Brind'Amour, superstar forward Sebastian Aho, and all-around good guy and glue guy Jordan Martinook, among others, one of our other favorite people connected to this great sport and our state's NHL team is a former colleague of mine who has been since 2020 the radio and television play-by-play voice of your Carolina Hurricanes. You may remember him, as I do, as a prominent sports radio host in the Triangle area of North Carolina for a long time. And over a period of years, he went from hosting the Hurricanes pregame and postgame shows to serving as the team's rinkside reporter, to eventually jumping into that broadcast booth as the franchise's play-by-play voice, alongside, of course, veteran color commentator Trip Tracy, for what is now called the FanDuel Sports Network, and on the radio side, still 99.9 The Fan. Mike Maniscalco, welcome back to the David Glenn Show, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, David. It's been a minute since we've done this. Good to see you. Good to see. The funny thing about this is everybody who I've worked with, you guys all look the exact same. And I'm the guy who I'm like, why am I the only one getting older? There's something weird going on here.
It's funny you'd say that, Mike. And of course, we know each other's families, so you have a sense of the person I call the lovely and talented Maria. You'll appreciate this. When we launched the North Carolina Sports Network, which of course has a big YouTube presence, she asked, why didn't you have a video presence more often when you were actually young and handsome? That was from my own wife. So I'm right there with you, brother. We're not getting any younger, but you're looking good, and I appreciate you carving some time out.
If you can, I can share the exact same story. So my wife she's a huge hockey fan, Kristen. She is pretty much at every home game. And somebody once asked her, well, do you go home and watch the games with Mike because he records them? She goes, no, I see him enough. I don't need to see that on the TV. So right there with you, DG.
Well put. Hey, we're going to pick your brain about the NHL and the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, but please do remind us as a starting point, how did a guy who originally hoped to be a college football player at SUNY Buffalo State end up as a play-by-play voice for the student radio station in the mid-1990s, long before you could have possibly imagined being one of these 32 number one play-by-play voices in the National Hockey League?
Well, the funny thing was, it was a Division III school, so I had no delusions of grandeur that I was going to be in the National Football League or anything like that, or even like when you see the portal today where it gets scooped up someplace else. But basically, I got hurt at a quote-unquote captain's practice, which really was nothing. And I twisted my knee, and it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, this isn't good. And it wasn't, the school had nothing to do with it. It's the summertime. It's like, hey, get back. We're going to run stuff. There was a time when I was skinny and could run. It was great. So that happens. And the funny story goes, my father, God rest his soul, I had to go see a orthopedic surgeon, and he's sitting there looking at me, and he goes, well, if you don't play anymore, the knee, it's not completely torn, but, if you play, it's probably going to rip in half. So, yeah, odds are up to you. And my dad goes, well, you think you're going to make the NFL, my son? And I go, no, I don't think so. He goes, I hate to be the first one to tell you, your career's over. So I was always interested in broadcasting. So back in high school, I did the morning announcements. I played football and baseball primarily. I had a brief stint as a basketball player where I had 5 fouls to give and was very good at that. But, I was going to be a writer, and that was always the second part of it, DG. And, you had that part of it, right? You were the writer. You put out the Bible when it came to covering the ACC and college sports in the Atlantic. So that was my path. You go back to the early 90s, we're talking 1993, 94. And then the knee injury happens, and I'm sitting here going, well, what am I going to do now? And I just got involved with a college radio station. It was student run. We broadcast the games, and the guy who did play by play had an internship that was preventing him from doing play by play. And I just happened to be in the lobby, and this is going to sound like one of these stories, but as you know, a lot of this business, you hustle, but you have to be in the right place at the right time. These two guys were saying, well, we can't do the game this weekend. And I go, well, perhaps I could be of assistance. I've worked out with the team. I knew the players. I know the game. And then I absolutely 100% lied and said that I called my high school games so I can help you guys out. Kind of hard to call when you're playing. And I did play. So I got onto the broadcast that way. I moved over. Actually, I was in the analyst chair my first year. The play-by-play guy, Mark Gorton, who I worked with, was a senior, and I was a sophomore at this time. So I rip off his style left and right. I've told him that. But Mark graduated, and then I moved into the chair. I was a sports director for the college radio station. I hired seniors and juniors to work for me, and as they graduated, jobs opened up in the Buffalo market, and I got my foot in radio there. And then from radio, there was a brief apprenticeship with being the weekend producer for the ABC affiliate in Buffalo. So I had like that TV mind, but then radio gave me a full-time gig. And then I moved from Buffalo to Richmond, Virginia, from Richmond, Virginia to Raleigh, North Carolina. And the rest, as they say, is history. There's a lot to fill in that history, but that's kind of how it goes.
Well, one quick follow-up to that. As a fellow broadcaster and even a fellow sports radio host, I view play-by-play as a really specific skill. And specifically hockey play-by-play is different than maybe, college level football play-by-play or other things that you've done. When you became the voice of the Canes at a crazy time in all of our lives, really, the pandemic roughly, did you feel like you hit the ground running as a play-by-play man because of the foundation you had over time? Or are you a dramatically different voice of the Canes as we speak in 2025 compared to maybe you reviewing yourself back in 2020?
I think that with any job, you constantly evolve with it and you change. And there are very few guys that I know who are the exact same they sound today and how they call a game and when they do it. Now, remember, when I got thrown into it, everything was off of a monitor. So basically, here's the good thing. Sometimes what you don't know, and you just, you just go from there. So go back to when we're all little kids doing play-by-play in front of the TV, and we've all had that moment. That was my start with the NHL. We were calling things off of the monitor. The team was up in the bubble in Toronto, and and everybody was like, "Oh, you had this feed or that feed." I'm like, "No, what you were seeing was what I was seeing." But luckily, I had so many great people behind me. And the good thing is, I knew the team, David. It's not like I got thrown into a different team. So I knew the players. I knew how they played. I know Trip Tracy very well, because I've known him pretty much since the year I got to Raleigh, North Carolina. So there was a good working relationship there. There was, of course, there's always going to be a little bit of, give and take here. But for me, it was, all right, just go and do it and see how it goes. And for me, the first game was, try not to hyperventilate, try not to pass out on it. And I've been fortunate enough. I've called college basketball ACC tournament games. I've called minor league baseball with the Richmond Braves. In fact, I got yelled at one time by Robert Fish because he was a play-by-play guy and he wanted some time to breathe. So he gave me the fourth, fifth, and sixth for one of these games, and it was over with in 15 minutes total. That included the commercial breaks. Like it was 3 up, 3 down for 3 straight innings. So, wow. But yeah, I'm vastly different today from that guy you heard. But there's one, I was gifted an Andrei Svechnikov hat trick, the first ever postseason hat trick in Canes history. And then 2, Sebastian Aho scores this unreal goal where he walks the defenseman and then he takes it around Tony D'Angelo, good friend of ours, and then beats Henrik Lundqvist. And it's one of these things, I don't have anything scripted. I'm not ready for a play like that to happen. And it tracked. Like everything I said tracked with it. And I went back and watched it and I went, well, that's not the worst thing I've ever heard. But yeah, no, the guy today who calls the game, it's completely different. I still sit down, watch the game, I review it, I critique it. I tell everybody nobody can say anything on the internet that's going to bother me more than what I've already said to myself when I'm watching it. But yeah, vastly different. And it's such a different discipline. Like when you say play by play, that's like saying, well, you're a swimmer. Well, do you swim the 100 meter? Do you swim the
Yeah.
1500 meter? Or, you're a track star. So, well, what do you do? Hockey is I think for me, the hardest of the sports as play-by-play because you want to, and you have this natural urge to fill in, hey, here's what's going on. But you also have to let it breathe, and you have to have your analyst have the room to break it down. So, yeah, I would say, in my opinion, I am much different than that guy back in 2020 who was sitting in empty at the time PNC, now Lenovo Center, PNC Arena back then with just some monitors and all right, we'll figure this out. Completely different from that, but at the same time, I had the belief I could do it. Like it was what it came down to, and I can give you the phone call when it was, hey, you're going to do the play-by-play for us. And my first thing, and I joke, is you sure you got the right number? So that was the thing. And then, the offer was there. And, there were a couple of people, my dad, one being, he's like, this is what you wanted to do your whole life. He goes, the talk show thing you just did. He goes, so as you know, dads have wisdom, David, as you've imparted it and had it imparted on you. He goes, well, if you don't do it, are they going to not play the games? I said, no, they're going to play because we'll just do it. And then Chris Patola, who I gotten to know very well from working with him. He would fill in and do some radio shows. Chris was the guy who was like, go ahead and do it. He goes, what's the worst thing that happens? He goes, because if you don't do it, you're going to kick yourself the rest of your life. So took the opportunity and, as Crash Davis would say, Lord willing, we're going to win a couple of ball games and we'll go from there.
This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are second to none. They've grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more online at AtlanticTireOnline.com.
If you are anywhere near Wilmington, North Carolina, and looking for a little live music, a cold beer, a tangy slushy, a fun crowd, or just a taste of the good life at the beach, Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach is the place for you. Located on North Lumina Avenue, just 1 block from the sand and waves of the Atlantic Ocean, Jimmy's features a full bar with nightly beer and drink specials, and it hosts musical performers almost every day of the year. One more fun fact, Jimmy's annual Children's Bike Drive, which started in 2017, now distributes more than 1,000 bicycles and helmets per year to young people in the Wilmington area and beyond. Jimmy's Bar, your home away from home on Lumina Avenue in Wrightsville Beach. Mike Maniscalco is the voice of the Carolina Hurricanes, joining us here on the David Glenn Show. Since you travel with the team, and for the 7th year in a row, the Carolina Hurricanes are not only in the playoffs, but alive and kicking here in the month of May. From the outside, Mike, and I have interviewed many of these guys, it seems as if guys like team captain Jordan Staal, star defenseman Jacob Slavin, from the outside, I would describe them as more low-key, kind of understated personalities who would rather their play do most of the talking. And then you have wild man Jordan Martinook and the wild young guy Seth Jarvis, who always looks like he's having fun, and then a whole bunch of characters in between. You're around these guys, you travel with this group. You even have like a 40-year-old Brett Burns and a 21-year-old in Jackson Blake. Like it just seems like this fun traveling circus. How do you describe this unique blend of personalities that you get to experience? Even before we get to the next question, of course, will be what's happening on the ice.
Well, I think you hit it with the nail on the head, the traveling circus, because that's what it is. Because there are so many personalities, and you have to include the head coach in Brind'Amour, who is probably the most controlled human being, disciplined to a T. This is how it goes. And then you'll have, Brent Burns at 40 years old. He's got more in common with Seth Jarvis at 24, 23 years old. They have that personality. And the thing that works for this club, Dave, that I can tell you, being around them, being in the locker room, having the access that I have, is what they do is there's not cliques. There's not this little groupie that we're going to be here, we're going to be there. They're inclusive. You come into that room, if you're Logan Stankoven at 21, 22 years old, they're not looking at you like, hey, you're a rookie, don't say anything. Hey, welcome to the Carolina Hurricanes. And that does come from the top down. You can say it starts with Rod Brind'Amour, and it really does. But then the leaders have to enact it. And you've got Jordan Staal, kind of the father figure for it. He's the guy. You don't want the look from Jordan Staal. I'm disappointed in you look. He doesn't have to say anything. Then there's Jordan Martinook. Sebastian Aho has become a lot more of a vocal leader as his time has in the NHL grown, and he's become that. He's such a fierce competitor. But the thing that works about the dynamic of the room, they know what makes it tick. And we're not going to have our little separate groups. We're not going to do this. We're not going to play favorites. This is how it works. We all have to work together and have one common goal. And the fact that they all buy in, and without getting into certain specifics, for guys who don't want to be here, don't want to be with that, they're not here. They're not here more than a season or two. So, you can look at the roster turnover and just point to it, but it is such a good group. And more importantly, and I'm dead serious when I say this, they're good people in that room. They really are. There's not somebody that you look at there and you're like, I don't know about that guy's character. They're all good people. They're all everybody you'd want to go out and have dinner with or have a beverage with or just have a conversation with. So I think that's why it works. Because when you can get that buy-in and the guys in the room care about each other that way, David, it makes it a lot easier to go through the hard stuff that an 82-game season and then the playoffs brings up.
Moving on to the ice, I have been itching to ask you this question. Like, as your friend, I could text you at any time and you'd answer this question, but I'm glad I saved it for the masses to be able to understand and appreciate your answer. You know me, I'm a season ticket holder. I make no bones about the fact that whereas I am an objective sports media member in most contexts, I'm a fan of the Carolina Hurricanes. But I know they finished with only the 10th best record in the NHL this year. They don't have home ice advantage, for example, against the Washington Capitals. I knew they were better than the New Jersey Devils. They have some holes and imperfections like everybody else. But when the computers and the analytics spit stuff out right now, Mike, with 8 teams standing, the 2 teams that are regarded as having the best percentage chance of raising Lord Stanley's Cup, depending on the computer, are the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. And again, I'm an optimist when it comes to the Hurricanes, but my hockey brain loves the Canes, appreciates the Canes. I don't quite see them as the co-favorites for the Stanley Cup title. What do you believe is in the numbers or in what you called for 80-plus games now, including the playoffs? What's baked into that cake that computers and many experts believe that this could be the Canes' year?
Oh, you kind of pointed it out that this is a team now for the 7th consecutive season has had postseason success. No, not the ultimate success, but they have won a round in the postseason. I can't say playoffs because when they beat the Rangers, that was a qualifying series, not a playoff series. So, but they're the only franchise that 7 consecutive years has won a postseason series. That's baked into them. Then you take a look at the core: Jacob Slavin, Sebastian Aho, Jordan Martinook, Jordan Staal, these players, Andrei Svechnikov, these players who've been here. They've gone through this for the last 7 years. They've grown with this. Now you add into the mix a couple of the players that they have added. And we can talk about Seth Jarvis, Jackson Blake, Logan Stankoven, Taylor Hall, who people forget about being another part of that Mikko Rantanen trade that was the big buzz for everybody in the hockey world. So they have this track record, but it's the way they play, David, that their game. And this year, I think the most frustrating thing for the team and the fans and all of us involved was the road record wasn't where it's been the past few years. And there was like really no reason or rhyme to it. Just, okay, they're not getting the wins on the road the way that they used to. But how they play the game, the players that they have, And I think that the coach, the numbers say everything they do makes them one of the hardest outs in the NHL. Now, there are some teams that have more talented players, like Toronto. You take a look at Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, William Nylander right off the hop. Those three guys, they're phenomenal. Same thing with Edmonton, with maybe the two best players in the world, Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But, Toronto has only gotten out of the first round once with that core. I look at Florida should be the odds-on favorite because you know what champions know how to do? They know how to win. And, the funny thing is you mentioned home ice. The only team the Canes would have home ice advantage against in the Eastern Conference Finals would be the Florida Panthers. Yeah. So, I look out west. I think that people look at the West as this gauntlet, this meat grinder, that who's going to be left by the time who's left standing by the time you get to the Stanley Cup final. There's just lots of things about this Canes team that they come at you in waves, David. It's not, okay, this line has to score or else they're in trouble, or, their goalie has to stand on his head for them to win. It really is the sum of the parts. It's not the parts. And when this team is rolling, it's four lines, the defense is contributing, and if they can get anything like what they got against New Jersey out of the power play the rest of the way, I see why I know why the numbers community loves them. But that being said, the playoffs are a different animal. You got to have some luck. You got to be healthy. Those bounces have to be there. But right now, as this team is constituted, I wouldn't bet against them. And it's not because I'm the play-by-play voice for this team. You just see some teams that are ready for that step. And I think this is a year where the good thing is, going into the year, everybody finally said, I'm not picking them this year. I'm tired of that. All right, well, we'll show you. And right now, yeah, the Devils were beat up. I'm not trying to say that they beat like the Canadiens of the 70s, but you got to get through them quick, and they did. And now this series against Washington is really going to be same thing for Washington. They got through Montreal quick. Going to be interested to see how these two teams really square off. I don't think this is going to be a short series, but how they square off. And I do like the winner of the series to come out of the East.
One of the cool things about your coverage of the Canes beyond these 5 or so years as the play-by-play voice is that you got to live both the 9 straight years of no postseason appearances and immediately followed by 7 consecutive seasons of making the playoffs. And in all of those years, with that little asterisk you mentioned, winning at least one series and twice getting all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm going to ask you about Rod Brind'Amour in a second, but the other key figure who's right there at the fork in the road from 9 straight bad years to 7 straight good ones is Tom Dundon. How do you describe, I mean, I know the man directly or indirectly signs your paychecks, but how do you describe what changed? Because that, Mike, is about as dramatic a turnaround as the NHL has ever had from a perennial loser to it's one of the longest postseason streaks active in the entire NHL right now.
All you have to do is take a look at where the Canes are against the salary cap since Tom Dundon has become the principal owner of the team. It's the shortest answer, and it's the right answer. He wants to win. He puts money into the club. The dynamic that they set up in the front office to identify players, to have the homegrown talent that they can add through the draft and how they recognize that. And you take a look at some of the things they've done through the draft where, one year it felt like they had 300 picks. It really did. And they believe in the more darts you can throw, the more targets you can hit. But then at the same time, how smart they've been identifying who to spend money on, who to give the long contract extensions to, what free agents will fit, being bold and aggressive in trades. And look, that's not to, and whenever you say that, it always comes into, well, you're disparaging the other guy. Well, for Tom Dundon, money was not the object to the roster at all. So when he looks at this team is really spent to the cap pretty much every year that he's taken over. And we can talk about the Jimmies and the Joes, but you got to have the dollar signs to pay those guys to come in here and play. And then you also have to have a hell of a coach. And promoting Rod Brind'Amour to be the head coach, coinciding with, I'm going to give you a roster that can win. I think that those are the A and B corollaries. A plus B equals, here's why we're in this renaissance. And thank you for reminding me of the 9 years in the wilderness, David. I still wake up at night. Thanks for the call. Moving on. A lot of
Man,
post games.
and what's crazy is back then I had those really expensive seats in the front row, and I renewed those seats 9 years in a row, even though there wasn't always a whole lot to celebrate. Although they did win a bunch of home games, they just were not a playoff team back then.
Yeah.
You led me right into the Rod Brind'Amour question, and I don't know if there's as succinct an answer as you just gave with Tom Dundon. But Tom has called Rod one of the greatest leaders he's ever met in any context, not just hockey. You've seen the articles about how not only do most of Rod's players just revere him, but even opposing players, most of them, a small percentage say they'd avoid Rod because he scares them. But a large percentage of opposing players say, yeah, if they were going to play for somebody else, he'd be one of the first that they would pick in the entire league, according to a poll by the folks at The Athletic, for example. How do you describe how that guy became the first NHL head coach ever to win at least one postseason series in his head coaching career? And why does he command, and how does he command that respect and following in his own locker room?
I can actually break this down. I don't know how if it'll be as succinct as for the Tom Dundon answer, but we've all worked for bosses who, if they've been in our shoes, they've done what they're asking us to do. There is the built-in respect of, okay, this guy's asked me to do something that he's done before. It's not the guys who, and fair or not, because I don't know that you necessarily have to be a former player to be a great coach, because a lot of times great players never turn out to be a good coach. But in this situation, and by the way, Rod was a great player. Why he's not in the Hall of Fame, that you can bring me on for that debate, and I will come in with the placards for that. But he's done everything, David. He's been the captain of a Stanley Cup championship team. He's played in the Olympics for Team Canada. He's played in world championships. He's won gold in world championships. He was a 19-year-old kid who was called up to be thrown right in the middle of the playoffs with the St. Louis Blues and scored on his first shot in the postseason. He has been an all-star. He has been a Selke Trophy winner, and he's also been a fourth-line center at the end of his career, and then, had an Ironman streak, got hurt. Then he's been scratched. So when he talks, it's real. It's not bluster. There's nothing to, no smoke being blown, because guys know that too. Like, that's the one thing now. Athletes, they want to be told the truth by their coach. So if you're telling me this is why I'm not playing tonight, okay. And Rod's been there. He knows how terrible that is as a player. And I think that's why, David, it's that built-in, this is Rod Brind'Amour. Okay. Yeah, this isn't, Mike Maniscalco saying, hey, we got to sit you tonight. This is a guy who you look in, he's got the bona fides. And then if you've ever been around him, he is such a charismatic guy. He's going to kill me for saying this, which is fine. I'll take the hit. But he is such a good speaker, and he's so charismatic, and he is just one of those engaging personalities that, it's let's go to the old E.F. Hutton commercial. When he talks, everybody listens, because the stories are great. And he's got such a great sense of humor, and you wouldn't know it, but it's just, that sneaky, good, dry Canadian humor. And he is so driven to win, and whatever it takes to win. And it's not fake, but I can tell you about all of the things as a player, but he cares about people first. And that's the other thing. Like, nobody is as ecstatic for Eric Robinson having a baby right now. And, what goes into, hey, you want to be there. And Sebastian Aho now, a new dad, which, by the way, that's weird when, I know when he came into the league and now he's a dad. But those are like the moments, and he gets it. And the players get it. And when he gives those speeches, it's I don't know how he does it 82 games and gets guys fired up for it every time, but he does. And it's just one of those things where he is real. There is no veneer to him. There is nothing fake. There's no facade. This is Rod Brind'Amour. This is what he's all about. And that's how it's worked. And because players see through it. And the players who don't want to buy in, he doesn't suffer fools. That's the other part of it. They're not going to be around
for sure
to that point. And here's a side note. So I'm a terrible golfer. You know that, David. You and I have played, but I have, I have clubs and I can move it around. The greatest accomplishments of Rod's life are, one being the Stanley Cup is great. I mean, in what he's done now these 7 years. The only athlete and I know you're a Philly guy, the only athlete never to be booed by Philadelphia fans.
True.
They
He's
love,
revered there.
love
Revered.
him, revered there. They do the starting lineups, and the fans will have a little word for after every player, and they'll introduce the coach. And normally they don't say anything about Rod.
That's
so
a
that's
rarity.
one. But two, we were in it was a Canes and media golf tournament, and Roddy was on my team, or I should say I was on Rod's team. And he somehow captained us to the second place finish with his carcass dragging around. I think I hit maybe one shot that we used the whole day. And that's I think his greatest athletic feat. He was able to pull that one off. Which, by the way, if he's listening, nobody was beating Jim Rutherford's teams in those tournaments. So technically,
that's true.
We finished like 1B.
Jimmy took that stuff very
Yes,
seriously back in the day, and sometimes still does. Hey, you got to blink like a hostage or something if we need to let you go for
I got time
or something.
I got time for you.
Cool. Hey, when you and I were young hockey fans growing up in the northeastern United States, we would see and hear our team's favorite broadcasters call the games all the way through the end of the season. I mean, Mike, Gene Hart, voice of the Flyers back in the day, I think passed away in the 90s. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I can still hear Gene Hart's voice in my head in the year 2025. That's what a part of my childhood he was, just as you're a part of the Caniac experience for so many people here in North Carolina. My question to you, one is serious, one not as serious, but is it simply that over time, as national TV money and TV partners for the National Hockey League started spending more money, they just started to demand more exclusivity in the postseason, where, of course, we got you and Trip Tracy and your team for the Devils series, but we do not get you, at least on the TV side, for the second round and beyond. And then part two is, do fans get mad at you guys when they recall that that's how the rules work nowadays? I mean, it's obviously not your fault, but I just feel like there's this emotion around hockey fans every year at this time when they realize if they have a special team that goes all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, it's going to be 3 series where they do not hear their favorite, or see their favorite faces. They can still hear their voices on the radio side. But the people that know the team the best are you guys. And we have some talented professional broadcasters calling these games, but they're not the Canes team. So that's a 2-part long-winded question. What you got?
Well, to the second part, no, nobody gets mad at us now, thankfully.
Good.
I'm like, you're going to have to send your letters to ESPN, TNT, and Gary Bettman. Basically what it was born out of, to my understanding, though, was in the older contracts, because you could go into the second round, I mean, going up a couple of years ago, but teams like the Rangers, the Flyers, the Blackhawks, who were having all that success, and clearly a ton of eyeballs were watching those teams play, and the Kings. Well, there it was, you were getting the exclusivity rule. So it would be NBC Sports. They would be like, well, all right, we're going to have this game tonight. So guess what? The Rangers, you're not on MSG, and you're not LA, you're not on Fox. And so basically what started happening was the big markets were like, well, look, you're taking all of our games. We're not doing anything anyway. So what I've been told is there was a bit of a concession, the latest go around, which has now seen TNT and ESPN, which was the local markets get every game in the first round, no matter what. But then after that, okay, it's all national from here on out. So, the dollar drives it, and I get it. And for me, it's funny because I grew up with Ted Darling. He was the silkiest, smoothest hockey voice I have ever heard. And then Rick Jeanneret. Those were my guys. RJ moved from the radio booth to the TV side of things. And I can close my eyes and hear calls just like you can, David. So that comes into it. The other part of it is, you want to be a part of all of this, when you're talking about the broadcast and what goes into it. And it's funny because you said, and you're part of it. And I don't think of myself that way. I don't, people come up, you're the only voice I've heard. I'm like, it's only been 5 years. It really, I'm like, oh, well, okay. But it's one of those things. It's such a special time of year that you want to be part of it the whole way. Now, I am really fortunate that we move over and do radio. It's not like I'm done and sitting on the couch from here on out. but it's one of those things where you make such a connection with, and I think where I love working with Tripp, because he's got all the huge caniacs and, his love for the fans and how it's reciprocated. You don't realize like that connection until you're like out somewhere. And like the other day, I'm in Costco and I'm walking in and, guy points at me and I'm looking at him and I go, yes, I am. He didn't have to say anything. And he goes, what are you doing at Costco? And my wife goes, well, he needs to shop too. So, it's things like that. But it's to try to answer that question. It's you want it to be more. But, again, like what we get into, the dollar kind of rules it. And you understand it going in, and that's fine. And by the way, we talked about how hard of a job this is, David. For the national guys, when they get grief, I'm like, you know how hard it is to be dropped into a city and be like, all right, do this game and do both teams and be good at both of it. Because here's what I love. If you ever get to that level, you're good when both teams' fans hate you, saying that you're playing, because that's it. But it's no, it really is just one of those things where you'd love to. I would love for it to be us all the way through. Those moments are great, and especially on the TV side of things, because I do think we have that connection. But I think those days are long gone, and that's just the way everything's going. But who knows? In 5 years from now, maybe something else changes, and the regionals get put back into play, where we are going to do every game on the TV side. So it's constantly evolving, David. I mean, did you think, when you and I met, going on 18 years, that you and I'd be sitting here talking, on a screen to each
on
other?
YouTube? No.
Yeah.
No, I definitely would not have imagined that. You're right. Things can change quickly and unexpectedly. The Lawson Insurance Group in Raleigh is a family-owned business led by 3 actual brothers who happen to be huge sports fans: Ken Lawson, Miller Lawson, and Michael Lawson. I know these guys, I trust these guys, and I send these guys my own insurance business and that of my family. The next time you have insurance needs, I hope you'll do the same. The Lawson Insurance Group is known for its commitment to community and its dedication to ensuring that North Carolinians and their businesses are prepared for life's inevitable challenges, with the reminder that as a high street insurance partner, Lawson Insurance Group offers local expertise and support that, combined with High Street's extensive national resources, means more choice and support for you as their client. To learn more, search Lawson Insurance Group online. The Lawson Insurance website will be the first link that pops up. The Original Salt Works has become a legendary breakfast, brunch, and lunch place in Wilmington for both locals and out-of-town visitors over the last 50-plus years. Our good friend Bob Hubbard owns the place, but he's also the one cooking your food and often roaming the dining room to greet you with a smile and to make sure your visit is a great one. Bob has been running the show at this unique roadside diner for more than 20 years now, and he and his friendly, hardworking staff aim to treat you like one of their own. Try Bob's homemade omelets, or special recipe grits for breakfast, or his legendary cheeseburgers for lunch. The Original Salt Works, your breakfast and lunch choice on Oleander Drive in Wilmington. Speaking of that, you led me into my next question perfectly, as you often do. I have rarely, as a Canes fan, huge Caniac, as Tripp would say, rarely gone from excitement to confusion more quickly than I did with the whole Mikko Rantanen story. Now, those who are passionate Caniacs have already plowed this ground, I know. But for a more casual fan, how do you summarize what happened there? Just to remind everybody quickly, the Canes at times have not had enough playoff goal scoring.
Yep.
And near the playoff deadline this year, the trade deadline, they get one of the best goal scorers in the league, Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche. They had to give up Marty Necas and Jack Drury. They also got Taylor Hall because it was a 3-team kind of thing. And then there was a bunch of he said, she said. I don't claim to know who's telling the truth. I always trust Rod Brind'Amour when he says anything.
Yep.
And he said he came to believe Mikko Rantanen was only going to play longer term for 3 or 4 teams, and the Canes weren't one of them. And then, of course, the Canes ship Rantanen to Dallas, which is also still alive in the playoffs. And now the Canes have Hall and Stankoven, et cetera. What is the best, most accurate summary you can give for what happened there?
The way you set it up, the one thing that I don't think we'll ever get the real answer to was what Mikko Rantanen's agent was telling Mikko versus what he was telling the Colorado Avalanche, which then prompted, and if you're the Avalanche and the agent, and this is a lawyer, you've gone over these contracts. Sometimes they're smooth as silk, and sometimes it gets a little contentious, and sometimes somebody says the wrong thing, and certain doors either close or something else opens up. How I read the room is the Avalanche kind of are looking at, they have other players they have to sign, most notably Cale Makar. His contract is coming up, and he's going to command huge dollars. And Nathan MacKinnon is the guy who is the engine for the Avalanche. So can you really pay Mikko Rantanen more money than what's going to go there? And they're looking around, are we going to have this situation where we've got all this money tied up into 3 or 4 players? Now what do we do? So then you come to find out the Avs were amenable to like a $12 million deal. But the agent is like, well, I can go get a better deal elsewhere. Well, instead of Colorado sitting there going, well, you're going to walk away. You're not taking this deal. You start calling teams and say, this guy's available and what can we do? And, everybody's kicking tires on everybody. So that deal gets made. Rantanen doesn't have the no movement clause at that point. So you can move him here. I think he comes to Carolina. I think he was going to give it a shot. And by the way, for people who are looking for he was a malcontent and he didn't fit in, he was a nice guy. I mean, he did not give off in the locker room the air of, I don't want to be here because this isn't. I think he gave off as he played a couple of games and he's like, kind of for him, he was testing the Hurricanes. Because very, very few times in an athlete's career and in the NHL do you have the hammer where you can swing it and you can dictate where you're going to go.
Yeah.
And so I think he gets to Carolina. I think Carolina would have liked to have had maybe more assurances. This is just me on the outside of it, of they were going to get him in. But you heard Eric Tulsky's like, the GM said, look, it's our job to convince him this is the place for him. I think he gets here. It's a whirlwind. I think that he doesn't see the trade coming. For me, that's the big part, the whole human element. He doesn't see the trade coming. He comes here to Carolina, and then he's just like, you know what? No, this doesn't feel right to me. And, at least he said it, instead of the Canes and watching him just walk away for nothing, much like Colorado. So Carolina has to move quickly. They do. I love Logan Stankoven as a player because he fits what the Canes do. As you saw, Rantanen has that ability, but it wasn't really fitting. And how much of it was, the give a hell meter versus, thinking of his own interests and everything that goes into it. But I think at the end of the day, what could have really been a net zero or a negative for everybody, I think it's going to turn out to be a positive for everybody, because Natchez and Drury, we'll see what happens with them in Colorado, because I don't think there was any guarantees that, even though they were under contract for next year, well, what are you going to do next year with them? What were you going to get? And to bring in the picks and the Hall that you got, no pun intended with Taylor Hall, but to bring that in, I think that the Canes made the most of that situation and what it's turned into. But yeah, it's definitely I think it'll go down as one of the more odd trades in situations in the NHL, at least in this century. But I think just overall it got to a point, and I hate speaking for people, but I will go with Mikko Rantanen knew that this was going to be his time he can choose where he wants to go. And you know what? Look, he tried on the tuxedo and he didn't like the color. So, that's the best way you can look at it. And the Canes will be like, all right, we'll move on instead of just sitting here and trying to force a square peg into a round hole. And look, you get Logan Stankoven out of it, this guy's going to be in the league for a long, long time, David. So that was my read on everything. But the big key to me is we'll never get the answers to what happened in Colorado that facilitated this trade. And somebody one day might write a book about it. I don't know.
Hey, I'm glad we got to hit a lot of big picture items as our audience gets to know you even better, personally and professionally. But I do have to ask, of course, about the opponent of the day, the Washington Capitals. Right out of the gate, we all think of Alexander Ovechkin, leading goal scorer in the history of the NHL. And you're a heck of a goalie yourself. We as goalies probably admire the Logan Thompson angle. I mean, I thought he was one of the 5 best goalies in the regular season when he was healthy. So that's a hurdle the Canes will have to get past. And then I just think of Tom Wilson, who I saw on your broadcast mouth words to Sebastian Aho.
Yeah.
Who's going to protect you? Because Wilson likes to kind of be physical, and he's the rare enforcer that can actually play hockey. Let's face it, he is. And sometimes he's been a thorn in the Canes' side. And yet the computers love the Canes in this series. What do you see as the keys? Because either team is good enough to win this series, but the analytics say the Canes, and I saw 2/3 of the ESPN experts picked the Capitals for whatever that's worth. But what do you see when you look at this matchup?
I am glad you brought up Logan Thompson, because for me, when people ask what was the biggest difference in the Caps from last year to this year, there's 2 things that stood out to me. They got younger because no TJ Oshie, no Nick Backstrom. So they had to rely on Connor McMichael. They had to rely on 6'6" Alexi Protas and give him more time. And then they bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, and getting younger, they kind of got faster in that. But then they had a goalie who gave him a chance every single night. You know, the Caps turned it around last season when they leaned on Charlie Lindgren to be their goalie, and he gave them solid net minding. And Thompson was great all year long for them, and so was Charlie Lindgren. So that's a pretty astute observation. Like, that's the difference there. Styles make fights, and I think that the Caps want to throw haymakers. They want to be the big bully, the physical team, the way that they can play, and just the sheer size that they have. But this is the one where, if you're the Canes, this is where you need to be the fox that outruns the hounds, and they can't. And I love there's this narrative, David, that the Canes are not a physical team because you look at, well, they don't have anybody who hits and they don't do this. Well, this is why analytics loves them, because they're always holding on to the puck. Yeah. If you have the puck, you're not hitting people. You know, they're chasing you around. So for me, it's which style dictates the round and how it's going to go and how it's going to be scored. And when, Tom Wilson, I remember that, calling it, we're seeing it happen. William Carrier wasn't in the lineup. Well, he is now. And he's a guy who you don't ask him to do that, but he's got that in him and he can do it. And all he does is he's a guy who just waits for the playoffs. I think that he sits there and just dreams every single night of, can I get to the NHL playoffs and then play, because he's built for it. Mark Jankowski, he's a bigger body. Now, he's not a super physical player, but he's 6'4", he's 210 pounds, and he can wear on you. Jordan Staal. So the Canes can, if you want to go that route, you can. Rod Brind'Amour said it, and this is an old adage, so I'm not breaking any new ground here. But in this series, if you're going to hit, you hit first. You don't hit back. So you might see some things, and as a fan, you're going to be like, come on, you hit first, because the guy who retaliates is the guy who's going to take a penalty, and they're going to get called. So that's the big thing for me for this one. And it is going to come down to the goaltending. Frederik Andersen's back. He's skated, he's practiced, he's good to go. He's given the green light, and he was very good in that Devils series. So we'll see how that comes down to. But this comes down to the special teams. I like to check boxes in series. I put things together. Coaching. I think Spencer Carberry is going to be the coach of the year in the NHL, the Jack Adams Award winner. But Spencer Carberry versus Rod Brind'Amour in the playoffs, I give the edge to Rod Brind'Amour. Forwards. This one, it's a hedge, so feel free to roast me on Dave's YouTube channel here. But the forwards have the edge where the game is being played. If it's in Washington, I give the forwards for the Caps the edge because Carberry is going to get the matchups he wants. When it's in Carolina, it's going to be Rod Brind'Amour. But then here's my thing. When you go to a Game 7, you throw out every box because Game 7s are their own animal. Defense, I give it to the Carolina Hurricanes. Goaltending, I love how Logan Thompson played this year. But if you're going to get that out of Frederik Andersen, I trust Frederik Andersen for that. Special teams, Canes have the better penalty kill. And I saw enough out of that power play that leads me to believe that they can get enough in that series. It's going to be close. You might have one game where it's like a 6-1 whatever final, but I will be shocked if this thing does not come back to Washington and then go back to Raleigh. I think it's at least 6 games, and I like the Canes in 6.
I have many other questions, but I'm going to leave you with one for time purposes, so as not to keep you too crazy long. I am fascinated by 23-year-old Russian defenseman Alexander Nikishin, who the Canes drafted years ago, but he's been playing in Russia. He's still learning English, but he has been here for at least a couple weeks now after a crazy planes, trains, and automobiles type story. He's been described as the best defenseman in the world who isn't already in the National Hockey League. But he's 23 and has to learn a new system in a short period of time. What do you think are the odds that Rod is confident enough to throw him into the fire during the 2025 postseason? Or do you think it's more likely that, we have to wait for future years to enjoy this fascinating young player?
No, I think you wouldn't have to wait years. I think you'll see him next year. Like, I think he'll be a part of the rotation next year, just as you look how things are lining up for the Carolina Hurricanes. It would take injuries for him to get in, and Rod actually did a really good job describing this the other day, David. It's not the ability. It's when you come over here, it's the systems and then the communication of those systems. And his English is very limited right now. So if somebody's calling out something and he doesn't understand it and he turns the wrong way or throws the puck in it, and you don't want to put, that's the one thing, and this is, you go back to your Rod Brind'Amour question. You don't want to put players in situations where they can't be at their best. And in the playoffs, if you put a guy in a situation and he doesn't know what to do with the puck, and it's not that he doesn't have ability, but that could be the difference in the game. And now you lose a game in a play. You're only promised 7 of them, and you got to win 4 of them. So I think that in the few things, and I know this is a snarky answer, and I don't like to do that often, but people ask me, how does he look? I'm like, he looks like a defenseman. That's what he looks like. But I think it's when he gets a little bit more of the language and he gets that a little bit more comfortable being here. I think that's a big part of it. And the smart thing is he's around all of this now, David. So he gets to see it. He can soak it up. I'm not trying to disrespect the KHL when I'm about to say this, but Josh Lavo was the leading scorer in the KHL this year. Josh Lavo had bounced around the NHL before he goes over there. The AHL is a pretty damn good league. I didn't hear anybody talking about the guy who's the best defenseman in the AHL needs to be on the ice for whatever team is out there. So I think he's going to be great. And look, we always want to see the new guy, and you've been promised this, and you see this. And the KHL is a good league, and he is that good over there. But it's a little bit of a different game here. And you want to give him all the tools in the toolbox to go succeed and play. You wanted a number, I would say 10% because it would take a couple of guys not being able to go to see him play. But, for practice, he looks the part. And then there are some times where, where is he supposed to be on a drill? And if you're the Canes right now, I'm a big believer. It ain't broke, David. Don't fix it. Just keep riding this until you have to make a change.
It's a fascinating part of the game. Because as you and Tripp and your team have called the Canes games, man, it's been a really consistent first, second, and third pairing over a very long period of time. And I know the Capitals lost one of their top 4 defensemen. So now the top 2 haven't played together all that often until recently. And then the second 2, they're all talented, but you're with a different guy. And those tiny, tiny little increments that matter in the playoffs, like communication, like chemistry, left D to right D. It's fascinating stuff. There's 8 teams still standing. Make sure to catch our good friend Mike Maniscalco, Tripp Tracy, Hannah Ray Yates, and the rest of the team on 99.9 The Fan. Of course, they are still delivering the goods on the radio side. Mike, you're a great friend, man. I enjoy watching and listening to you guys. Thanks for the extended visit here on the David Glenn Show. Keep up the good work, and I am allowed to say, of course, go Canes.
Oh, absolutely. Go Canes. Great catching up with you, DG. Been far, far too long. And we'll go play golf, and you can see that my game is not improved at all.
I'm right there with you, man. It'll be easier for you to play with me than it is, and I've played with Roddy, too. It can be a little intimidating when some of those big hitters, or even a short but steady hitter like Jimmy Rutherford has done over the years. Those guys are freaks.
Absolutely.
Great to see you in any context, man. Keep up the good work, and thanks for the visit on the North Carolina Sports Network.